Okay, started. Okay, thanks, Roger. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming, and thanks people online to join as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce Paulina from UCL. Paulina is a very old friend. We know each other for more than 5 years. We working on different projects before my tenure here. I was at the ICHI in the same institute. Paulina is a Wellcome Trust funded research fellow, doing great work in terms of text analytics, NLP, especially in cognitive analysis, looking at the bias of large language models, including with public health or similar kind of business plans. All yours, Paulina.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about about my Humble lab that I set up. There's a few of us running it. It's a small team, and a little bit about my background. So I'm a behavior scientist by background. I also do health psychology, which means I knew nothing about AI until 2 years back, actually until the pandemic. And so this is like a little textbook that really dictated my further work as a fellow now. So I was working in Public Health England back then as a behavioral insights advisor, and we were doing lots of stuff around health behavior. So running around supermarkets and trying to negotiate with Sainsbury's how they place their product, going to GP clinics, talking to GPs how they talk about physical activity. And then pandemic hit, and that was it. We had to stop all that work and consider how we convey messages around self-isolation, how we sort of help with that, with sort of COVID-19 management. And in England, there was a system called Test and Trace. So this is the system to manage the pandemic in England. And at the end of the service, anyone who went through the service was asked to rate the service from very satisfied to very dissatisfied. And also there was this text box saying, how could we improve the service? Now, I'm in Public Health England. We are all quite busy. And my boss said to me, well, you're interested in digital health and human-computer interaction. Why don't you analyze the data from the free text responses so we can get some feedback? How can we improve the service? Now, I opened the file, and it was 16,000 responses that were all free text. And he asked me, well, can you do it for tomorrow's program board so we can implement some of those changes? So since then, and I had my eyeballs for the analysis and absolutely no technology. So since then, I've been thinking about how could we analyze free text data in a way that's meaningful for public health. So this is just one example. Too many phone calls expecting me to talk for 30 minutes whilst my father was dying from COVID-19 after having a hip operation, and then receiving yet another phone call asking me to talk for further 20 minutes. My father passed away today. Now, this was one of those responses from very dissatisfied users. At this stage, we've got 1.8 million responses from NHS Test and Trace, and most of this data have never been analyzed. It's been gathered, but not analyzed. So going back to what I do at Humble is this kind of working in this tension space between qualitative analysis, which is more to do with small data sets, but very granular, understanding human experiences, doing interviews, doing focus groups, and getting your teeth into the data, and using your theoretical background, your understanding, your expertise around what it is to be a human and human experience in various different spaces. And then on the other side is this computational analysis, which it has scale, but potentially we don't know how meaningful, how nuanced the systems are and how to evaluate them. So this is the tension I'm working with. So with Humble, the sort of the three things what I'm trying to do is, okay, we've got any free text data and we want to extract meaning out of that data, and how we can use AI and human intelligence to do that, and how we can get nuance out of it. For example, the beauty of free text data is that you can have sociodemographics there, and you can see what were the experiences of, let's say, underserved or minoritized populations. And the third one, if you use technology, how can we ensure that it doesn't perpetuate social inequalities? So here I talk about bias, stereotyping. So being non-technical, I see sort of the natural language processing and the space where Humble plays. So for the last 3 years, I've done a hell of a lot of work to just learn about natural language processing and what kind of methods are there to help analyze human experience data. And within that, really, I see it as a small portion of which are large language models, which a lot of work is being done now and a lot of hype around, but this is just one domain of which I would say natural language processing, or the space where textual data can be analyzed. So this is where Humble is. And what I did was I developed this thing called machine-assisted topic analysis, or MATA. And what MATA really does is, okay, if we take the best of AI, speed, cost effectiveness, and accuracy, however you define accuracy, and create communities of words. And here I talk about topic modeling, taking a lot of data and organizing it using AI, and then pass it on to human intelligence who can interpret, find meaning, use theoretical understanding, use human intelligence in order to analyze the data. So this is a principle behind MATA. And what we've done now on more than, I think, about 8 or 9 data sets from social media to free text responses, is organizing the data using topic modeling. Then there's a machine learning model that what I call, we do diagnostics, which means what is the optimal number of topics for this specific data set. And what we do is create sort of understanding based on most frequent words, most exclusive words related to the specific topic. We never give a label to the topic. It's up to humans to do that. And what we do then is create 20 representative responses for each of those topics. And this is really the humans then take over. So let's say we've got 5 topics and we create labels for each of those topics, and then 20 representative responses. And this is what qualitative researchers work with. Instead of working with the whole data set, we work with 20 representative responses, where qualitative researchers would do the work that they normally might do, which is summarizing, creating themes and sub-themes, looking at connections. And this is sort of this in-depth work that qualitative researchers are able to do. So we've analyzed this using this paper where we compared human analysis to machine-assisted topic analysis, or MATA, as I mentioned to you. And we've done a proof of concept on 40,000 index responses from the NHS Test and Trace I just mentioned to you. So these are just MATA in action. So more sort of free text responses. We looked at a study where we compared different topics across different sociodemographics. So the beauty of the structured topic modeling that I'm using is that you can put covariates in there. What we had was gender, age, and IMD, which is sort of approximation of sociodemographic status. And then you can see whether certain topics were more prevalent in certain groups. We looked at social media data and other data sets that are sort of in press. So I want to just briefly to show you MATA in action. This is my absolute favorite topic. I did my PhD in digital health. So does anyone remember apps for health? I mean, apps 20 years ago were the thing that's going to change the world and we're going to live happily ever after. That was 20 years ago. Actually, the App Store was open in 2008. So we had Apple App Store, and then we have Android App Store. And within that, we've got this widely used so-called health apps. And what I really wanted to do is, well, what kind of evidence there is that it's effective? Yes, there are some studies looking at evaluation of digital health apps, but are we looking at negative consequences, potential negative consequences? So I was absolutely adamant that I wanted to do a study on that, and I wasn't sure how to do that. And then X or Twitter came out, not came out, actually closed. So just before Elon Musk decided to close researchers' access to Twitter data, we scraped Twitter we have 160,000 tweets about money-making machines in the app world. If anyone wants to use it, let me know. Happy to share. So some researchers talk about scientific regression of the field of digital health because we have so many apps. They're making billions, they are downloaded in billions, but we really don't know the effects of it. So what I wanted to do is apply Mata to those apps that make money, most money worldwide, and see if we can look at any issues as expressed in those tweets. So what we did with that, first of all, I had to find out what are the money-making machines. So these were fitness apps, menstrual tracking apps, and mental health apps that help you to sleep, meditate. So these are the three behaviors that are targeted by the money-making machine. But here I'll just focus on so-called fitness apps. So what we had is downloaded apps with the Twitter handle of those 5 companies that are sort of making a lot of money. And then what we did is we filtered it through negative sentiment because we were interested in negative impacts of those apps as expressed by social listening through Twitter. And then we analyzed 14,000 posts. So what we did here is run structured topic modeling. And through that diagnostics, we decided that we're going to run 10 topics on that 14,000 responses. And then we excluded some of the topics because we were mostly interested in the voice of the user. Let me show you which ones are excluded. So this is an example of app-generated tweets only. But this is actually still quite interesting. There was one topic which was kind of segregated into this topic where you can automatically post on Twitter that you lost some weight. Now, if you think about public health and well-being in general, this is not the best idea because it's a huge focus on weight loss, weight gain, and what we know from research that this is not the healthiest way to be healthy, to kind of address the issue of obesity. But there was a lot of tweets that do just that. So we've got 10 topics here, which are generated using a machine learning model. Now, behind all those 10 topics, there is human analyzing 20 representative responses from, 20 representative tweets. And then we normally do it with 2 researchers doing it separately. And then they're coming together and decide on the topic label. And then there's further work around writing up the result, creating themes or sub-themes if that's appropriate. And I just want to give you some examples of that. So remember, the research question is, we don't know very little about negative impacts of highly popular wellness-based apps. And this is what we wanted to find out. So let me give you an example of topic 1. So the complexity of tracking calories through oversimplified dietary algorithm. So all of the responses in this topic were around how oversimplified the dietary algorithms are. So an example will be my fitness app, where you have to input how much you eat, and that transforms into calories, macros, how much salt, sugar, fat you intake. And also, if you had a run, it also includes that in the algorithm and prediction. So 2 examples of that. So my app says, if I want to reach my goal weight, I need to consume minus 700 calories a day. Now, this is one of the example where an algorithm that's widely used is just simply wrong. But a lot of these algorithms are incredibly simplistic, and they set a goal for you that is completely unrealistic. Another example, can any breastfeeding mamas tell me how to add breastfeeding in the app? I looked up how, but I didn't subtract my calories. So this is just an example how there's complete lack of tailoring to people's circumstances. There's BMI, there's weight, there's height, and off you go. There's your goal setting for next few weeks around how much weight you are going to use. So this is just one example of 2 examples of tweets from topic 1. This is a different one. So topic 2 was more about loss of data, which disrupts the continuity of self-monitoring experience. If any of you are familiar with the phenomena of quantified self. So this is an idea that if you go for a run, it needs to be recorded. If you eat something, it needs to be recorded. If you do anything and it's not recorded, there's distress, there's lack of continuity of the being, which is very, very interesting. So here, for example, I'll give you one example. The rush when your Garmin watch finally uploads your ride to an app in the middle of ransomware attack. So there's a ransomware attack, but the most important thing here is whether my physical activity exercise have been recorded. And the second one talks about PB personal best for half marathon in training, and my phone died at the end. So none of it is recorded. It shouldn't matter, but it does. And it does matter, because if we train a human to self-monitor for longer periods of time, then this self-monitoring is extremely important. And again, that might have health consequences. Topic 4. So this is more about logging food. So there's stuff about physical activity in the fitness app, but also about logging food. And this can be aversive. So there were lots of emotions of shame, irritation, and guilt handled with humor. Because this is social media, that's how people express themselves often. So you haven't logged your breakfast for today, yeah, because breakfast was 3 pieces of stale bread, half a cigarette I found on the dorm steps, and a bottle of cranberry juice. I just got a notification from my app reminding me to log my dinner for today, but I don't want to because I'm ashamed I just ate Domino's. Pissed off already, giving me grief for adding a banana as part of my lunch. Stay below 56 grams of sugar, a fucking banana, fuck off. Now these are just, again, 3 examples, but this was, again, a very prominent topic of people logging their stuff and being ashamed and guilty about having high-calorie foods. Last one. As a behavior scientist and associated discipline, we know the importance of goal setting and action planning that is realistic and increases with time, so we make sure that people stick to the goal that they ascribe to themselves. But this actually is opposite, because people often lose their motivation. So how disappointing it is when you smash gym and for one day and there's no difference, back to eating Lotus Biscoff spread out of a jar. People want to see the results straight away. It was 3 days away from hitting my 100-day log streak on app. I missed 1 day and it's back at 0. Again, that's not a good goal setting theory. It's not a good design to increase motivation of the user. Right, so I just wanted to show you as a case example of how machine-assisted topic analysis works, and then researchers would work with whatever tools and skills they have in terms of qualitative analysis. So in this case, we brought it up further about, what does it mean to be focused on metrics? What does it mean to have unrealistic goal setting? Stuff around personal responsibility. A lot of things here in those apps are about self-management. From critical health psychology point of view, you're a citizen who is to manage their own health. If you don't manage your own health well, you might be stigmatized, you might feel shameful, guilty about yourself for not doing so. as opposed to the state providing opportunities for you to engage in physical activity and not eating in chicken cottage, for example, right? So availability of healthy food. And this, again, in the capitalistic sort of environment on steroids, we are sort of we are expected to look after ourselves. You can see that in research, for example, people with obesity, the stigma around obesity, or even diabetes. So that's that. That was an example of machine-assisted topic analysis. Okay, now I wanted to move to another question. Okay, so we moved from doing meta on different data sets, looking at negative consequences, looking at people's experiences and whether we can use AI to do it. But we are using kind of limited number of machine learning models. What about if you have this AI analysis of textual data using different models on the same data set? How do you know if it's any good? We have metrics to do so, but how do we have sort of this output in front of us that's textual? How do we know if it's good? So this is now in preprint. This is where we've done with Hong Han, and sort of what we did is created this evaluation framework for qualitative researchers, for anyone who works with text, to evaluate what's in front of them if they do any natural language processing on textual data. So what we did is we looked at 10 different models, so anything from more classical natural language processing to deep learning models. We look at BERT topic and we look at 3 different LLMs. And we conducted analysis on exactly the same data set, but at the same time, what we wanted to do is look at, well, what's quality and qualitative analysis. We extracted quality indicators to create grace, and then we tested it on those different models. I won't go into details because that's in preprint now, but this is kind of those 4 grace indicators. There's a little sort of assessment framework. You can have a rating scale, and then you write what do you think about that. Actually works pretty well, especially if there's 2 researchers do it separately and then come together, and you can really assess, like, okay, is this interpretable data that's in front of me? Is it actionable? Can I do anything with it? Does it have the nuance that I need? And maybe, is it redundant? Is there a lot of text there? Which often happens with LLMs, doesn't it? Yes, so that's grace. And sort of headline findings here is, so this is a classical natural language processing model. This is more advanced embedding-based model. And this is, again, meta. So we had 5 topics. The model, we've run diagnostics again, and it was decided that 5 topics was a good number of topics for LDA. And researchers decided that this was kind of, it was good. It was higher order, more conceptual model, and it requires more interpretation. But it's a good model if you have a lot of data and you want to do a quick and dirty analysis to see what's happening in that data set. Again, this is exactly the same data set, and this is BERT topic. So for BERT topic, you can see the topics were quite different. It was more like doing content analysis. They were much more narrow. They lacked depth, but they were descriptive. But sometimes, well, it's interesting that some of them were narrow and picked up on stuff that the other models did not pick up, such as impact of dog ownership. There were topics kind of also around bug of everything and nothing topics as well. But you can see how different they are. Now, here we go to LLM. So this is full automation. So we do meta, first of all, as I mentioned to you, doing machine learning model, and then pass it on to humans. This time, we didn't pass it on to humans. We did topic modeling and pass it on to LLM. So we are replacing human with LLM. Now, what you can see, and straight away, I mean, it kind of makes sense, but once you started reading these, you see that they're quite samey, quite flat, quite general. And we'll talk about it a little bit more. But again, this was decided that the structures, you know, it was quite structured topic, but very vague. And a lot of the themes were redundant and repetitive. So this is what we did with Grace. Now, we decided to dig a little bit more into what happens when you replace qualitative analysis with LLM, qualitative researcher. In qualitative research, there's a lot of disagreements about whether we should use LLM for qualitative analysis. Big people in the area of qualitative research wrote an open letter signed by many people saying we should reject the use of LLMs for qualitative analysis. There was a response to the rejection of the use of LLM for qualitative analysis. So this is a huge sort of space around egos and emotions, and kind of the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, but that's why we decided to do this analysis further. So we have the data on free text responses from people who experienced pandemic, and this was another study called C19 Wellbeing, where people were asked, how is your well-being? How's your behaviors? What influence your behaviors and mood today? So people were asked at 3, 6, 9, 12, and 24 months during the pandemic. And that's the data that we used. And we had 3 different objectives. First of all, we did MATA, like I told you already about topic modeling, qualitative interpretation. Second one was LLM as a qualitative researcher, so replacing qualitative interpretation with LLM. And the third one was bias analysis, which I will end the talk on. So first we did AI and then human intelligence. So we did exactly the same analysis, modeling it on this data. But we also wanted to look at nuance. So we've divided people in a crude manner, but that's what we had, into 6 different models. So we had men, women, older people, younger people, people who were from lower SES and higher SES. That's based on level of deprivation. And we gave different models to researchers who were masked to the label. So they didn't know whether there's males, females, older, younger, or people of low SES, high SES. What we were trying to get at here is, if qualitative researchers do machine-assisted topic analysis 6 times, they were great at doing this analysis, can they see any differences between people? In other words, is the topic modeling granular enough to tell us something about the differences between people's experiences during the pandemic? And then the second one, we did exactly the same, but instead of humans, we had large language models. Now, this is something that I've learned only recently, and I'm so I did a lot of mistakes early on and start, depicting AI as a brain, and I still do that. But there's this amazing work done by other researchers saying we should really stop personalizing what LLM is, right? So we really should not do that, and I should correct myself, and this is really what LLM is. That's a much better way to do it. Anyway, so quickly about the results. So we did machine-assisted topic analysis with 2 qualitative researchers that were masked. Obviously, it's quite hard to mask gender. But they did analysis, and there was some clear subgroup differentiation between the experiences of men and women in the pandemic and people from lower SES in comparison to higher SES. Now, when we gave the topic modeling to LLM, yes, there was still it summarized it, did qualitative analysis. There was some conceptual bundling, which I will mention in a second. But also there was a reduced differentiation between groups. So in other words, the results were much more flat, and it was quite hard to decipher whether there were some differences between groups in their experiences, according to SES specifically and gender. Patterns of LLM speak. Now, working with LLMs for quite a long time for qualitative analysis, we started seeing the same patterns of how LLM create qualitative analysis, and we decided to write it up. We have, I think, 7 different sort of patterns of LLM that we identify. And I'll give you an example of two, but that's in the paper. But, you know, with this headline level summarization, themes such as challenges, disruption, and coping strategies. This is incredibly vague, and I would say that no qualitative researchers will do analysis in that way. Challenges, disruption, and coping strategies, because this is a bag of everything. This is not a theme, really. This is also important. Interchangeable use of constructs. So mental health was exactly the same as physical health, was exactly the same as well-being, for example, which is not the same thing, but it was used as a synonym. This is my favorite one, the abstract fillers, rich tapestry of experience. I don't know how many times I've seen it. I've never heard human using that language. Multifaceted nature of experience. Again, quite LLM-y phrases. And this conceptual bundling when you have sort of isolation and isolation and connection between people. Kind of things like challenges and coping strategies, things that not necessarily make sense, but it's just bundled together. This is just an example of this what we call LLM speak. Okay, and I want to finish with bias stuff, or looking at stereotyping in LLM. So again, if you have this analysis of textual data in front of you, will change if you change the demographic label. So what we did here is same data as I previously mentioned. So we've got same identical textual responses, COVID pandemic, what influenced your mood, well-being, your behaviors. And then we do our prompting as we would do. You're a qualitative researcher. What you're analyzing is this. We try to make the prompt as good as possible. And there's only one change. So here we say, this is from women. And then we swap the label and say, the data is from men. So the underlying data is exactly the same. We're just changing the label. So we did the same for gender, age, and socioeconomic status. And remember, underlying data is exactly the same. And then we compare the AI interpretation, so AI qualitative analysis. So how did we compare it? Obviously, LLM produces a lot of text, and you have to find a way to compare these, because it will be hard to just give it to qualitative researchers who also might be biased towards analyzing this. What we did is lexical similarity, so did vocabulary change from one analysis to another? Sentiment analysis, again, emotional tone, positive, negative, neutral, and emotional analysis. So this is, did specific emotion shift when you change gender, age, socioeconomic status on the same underlying data? So that was anger, anticipation, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, surprise, and trust. So first of all, there was a lower lexical similarity after the label swaps. These are results, just selective results that are statistically significant. But that means already the first one, that something's happening there, because the lexical, there were lexical changes from one analysis to another based on the same data set. So what we found is that for males, the analysis, when we put the label on that it was a male, sorry, the underlying sentiment was more negative. And this was the same for lower socioeconomic status in comparison to women. For lower socioeconomic status label, there was more fear and disgust language, similar for men in comparison to women. So this is an example of the language shift. So for example, for men, there was more language, there were more vocabulary around disillusionment, discontent, unhealthy intent. And for women, there was more hope, healing, peace, and strength. So for example, for female, there was much more joy in the emotional analysis, less so for men. So again, male, lower SES, more negative interpretation. In terms of emotional analysis, more language of fear and disgust for lower SES. Now, this makes sense if we think about subtle stereotyping within the LLMs and perpetuating the perception of people of low SES. Although also something about men being more negative, I'm not sure, but there's certainly something around perpetuating the stereotype. This is quite subtle. But I think it matters. It matters, especially if we use LLM to analyze public health data on a large scale and actioning them. This, we just put a preprint for that study if you're interested at all. So this is just a summary of what we've done so far. So we developed this MATA workflow, and we have guidance of how to conduct MATA if you're interested. What we do at Humble is kind of comparing, again, analysis of qualitative research using LLMs and seeing if there is any subtle stereotyping, trying to evaluate, how can we evaluate those models in a way that's understandable for social scientists. Yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, Paulina, great talk, a lot of work, exciting results, surprising, shocking results sometimes. Any questions, comments from the audience in this room first? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Ian. I'm head of sociological and cultural studies at the university. No, it's fine. I've done this stuff too. I come in peace, not in disillusionment. And given my social economic status, that's quite an achievement. I have a number of technical questions, but I would like to do this separately because I've done quite a lot of topic modeling myself. I'm interested in how you've used it. But to link it to keep it broad, I'm interested in how you deal with the length of responses, especially when you're dealing with longer data. So you've said that you're going to take 20 examples, or the 20 best examples. I don't know how to do that. I saw the code. But I'm interested in why you've taken 20 being the number. I've got a couple of people who are online with the mics open. Perhaps we might get them to close them. But also, so I'm interested when you've got longer data. So when you're looking at maybe interview data or something like that, how long a response you feed back to the qualitative researcher. Do you give them the whole response, or do you give them a bit? Because with something like a tweet, it's quite easy. But with interview data or something a bit longer, it's a bit messier to try and do that. So I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in why you've done 20. So why the top 20? Why not the top 30? Why not the top 10? So just sort of to give us a sense of what you're looking for the output to the qualitative research to actually be.
To answer the first question around why 20, we've done 30, we've done 20, we've done 15, we've done 40 as well. It's testing different grounds and seeing what's best. Now, I'm kind of, when we're doing the modeling, depending on the granularity, on the shallowness of the data, because sometimes the data, especially free text, is quite shallow actually. Yeah. We would do 30. So my colleague did recently a YouTube analysis of nicotine pouches study, and she decided probably 20 is not enough. I want to do 30, I want to do 40, and actually decided the 30 is the meaty stuff that helps me to understand the topics. That's purely pragmatic. I call it, the second thing is, I call it when models get lazy, when it gives you only the shorter responses. So we tweak the model a little bit, and I think I will have to get back to you, but it's like, it takes into account two things. The length of the responses, so it's not only, so I think 70% the content, 30%. So we had to tweak it because otherwise it gets lazy. That's my language. Yes. Oh, see, I'll be interested in what you think, because I keep talking about free text responses and qualitative research, but really what I have done is free text responses and not qualitative transcripts or focus group transcripts. And the reason I stay away is probably, I'm not sure how to tackle it, because what you need to do is chop up the data. So we're trying to do that now and see if it's going to work, but we're in the process of developing the model. How do we chop up the data? And for this one, we've got semi-structured interviews. So they're quite kind of not too complex in terms of granularity. And that's what we're doing. done?
Yeah, it's hard. I agree. I've done newspaper articles and I've done interviews, and it is tough. You do have to start messing around with the length of the data it can deal with at once. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's really helpful.
And what topic modelings do you work with, out of curiosity?
The most recent one was newspaper data, so newspaper articles around particular areas which we thought were interesting, and then we fed those through the model. But this was a couple of years ago now, and I'm aware the technology just moves on all the time, so it's hard to keep track of. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting. How have you found peer reviewers around this stuff? Because I work predominantly in social policy, and they hate me deeply. So quantitative researchers hate me because it's something new and fangled. Qualitative researchers hate me because they think I'm trying to take their job. So
that is saying we were dropped with our first sort of analysis comparing human to machine because they couldn't find right reviewers once melted. So they dropped us after 6, 7, 8 months.
Oh God.
It's getting better.
Send it to me then.
So I think I'm so glad that they hate you because they seem that they hate me as well, using your own words. I think you're very innovative, so you should stay with that. I was just saying, yeah, no, it's hard. I normally public health policy. That's the only study that because it was more pragmatic and it was public health data, so we focus on what the data is about rather than the methods that are on. Yeah, it's hard. JMIR, I'm hoping. They are a bit more open, but that's health related. Where do you tend to publish?
I'm a social policy academic, so I bully and harangue my friends into giving me good reviews. Because it's really difficult, genuinely. People don't get this stuff. People love the presentations, then when they get it to peer review, they hate it.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Yusuf. I am a PhD in digital mental health. I'm focused about cultural adaptation, using different methods to study the digital apps and digital things. My question is very simple. When you said the LLM qualitative research, what sort of program did you use? If it's open or closed?
We used 3 different LLMs so far. We used DeepSeek. We used Copilot, that's available at University College London. So that was GPT-4, I think, at that stage. And we used Llama 3, which is quite a secure model, and it's been used at UCL, like in hospitals. So 3 different ones, and they were quite similar. Yeah. What do you work with? Do you use LLMs for your research?
No. So, but I was really inspired when you said, because I'm working about developing a framework for how we, there is a gap in terms of implementing individual or lived experience in digital mental health, and how we tailor that specific experience when we develop digital and technology. So I'm providing a framework how we can that in 3 levels, with the community, with the IT practitioner, and individuals. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Other questions, comments? You online? Feel free, just open your mic, switch on camera. If you have any questions.
Can I ask a follow-up if others are thinking?
Yes, please.
I'm interested what the qualitative researchers you are working with think of this in terms of, I imagine I would probably be burned alive if I suggested this in my own school, that they take the results of even topic modeling, and like once I persuaded them it's not really AI, which is always the first battle, then saying, okay, would you look at this output and do something with this? Because even that is antithetical to the way a lot of qualitative researchers think. They want to be deeply embedded in the data. They want to have possibly collected it themselves. They want it to have been in the site. They want to understand the people, and only then will they look at the data. So how did you manage to persuade them to be part of this?
You are very radical qualitative researchers. No, absolutely. I think it was easier for me because, you know, the whole story that I start with around 1.8 million responses and the pandemic, it's a real story of me. And kind of, you can't argue with me. Like I'm gonna argue with you, but this is a good use of, but same for you. You're doing social listening exercise through analyzing newspaper articles. This work can be repetitive and quite boring for qualitative researchers. Some of them think that this is actually free text responses is shallow data. Why don't we use that, how my critical health psychologist calls it? It's just a filing cabinet for me. So I can organize it, and they can look at more than 20 responses. They can look at how many they want. Yeah, you find your people who are into it, and then when they are out, they really see the value of it. Otherwise, you stay away.
Follow up question. That's it.
Yes.
Any recommendation for framework to use it in the LLM qualitative research? Any framework that we can use?
Not to use LLM?
No, with using LLM.
I would suggest not to use LLM. Yeah, because they're quite shallow and they flatten results. If you use it, there's the framework that came out recently, but that's from behavior science. Is when you use LLM, is what you need to report, how you need to evaluate. So there's like a checklist that they have created. I can share that to make sure that your results are to some degree reproducible. Testing different methods, not giving a huge chunk of information, not taking away the interpretation part from human, but maybe helping with coding. We are starting to see whether we can code large amounts of data. So doing a little bit of this coding work, which I know qualitative researchers would totally disagree with me. If you can use more classical natural language processing method, like I just showed you, and then get your teeth into the data, see what the data is about, because otherwise your expertise is going down. I spoke with, you're just running through a LLM, you don't really know what's in that data. That would be my recommendation.
I have a question. Under the two papers on the review, for the bias, you find difference because you do these counterfactual analysis, say female actually changed to the male. What does the element say differently? You might say, okay, you observe the difference, but does that difference mean bias? Actually, difference for some reason actually is correct.
Yeah. I see what you mean. I mean, yes, but I think if I was to, so you would make an assumption that people who are poorer are more disgusted with the situation and they have more fear.
Not in every single, differences. Maybe say two people similar situation, male, female. So focus on when I say something, language I use compared to another female in the same, same age, same socioeconomic status. They use the same language may mean different things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Personality difference, I'm not trying to say things absolute, for example, but another female may think differently. You see people might try to interpret the wording from different people differently, even the same wording. So that's why I mean, I totally agree. There might be a huge amount of bias, but the difference not necessarily equals bias.
No, that's absolutely true. And I think, when I said, and there's a hell of a lot of work for qualitative researchers, what we try to do here is kind of, when we masked qualitative researchers to the analysis and we say, okay, so that was for this one. Because we wanted to see whether there are clearer subgroup differentiation between, and there were. They really were. So some of the things around pandemic that the qualitative researchers found were very different. Some of women have talked about hope and connection more. It's totally true. And men talk about more practical stuff. People of low SES said more things around, there was more around stress, where working from home, whereas from people with higher SES, there are more talks about garden and the blessings of working from home. So that was in there, and qualitative research picked up on that, and that's the differences that are super important. Yeah. But I think what I would argue the bias analysis was real bias because the underlying data was the same.
Yeah.
All right, so if you have really radical qualitative researchers, could you get them to look at that with the same labels and see if they too inferred that in the same way as LLMs?
With the masked or unmasked?
Yeah. So if you presented the same data, because we know this from other kinds of study, that if people with black sounding names apply for jobs in America compared to white sounding names, you're much more likely to get interviewed if you have a white sounding name. So I'm wondering, even if you did this with your qualitative researchers and gave them the same data but labeled them in that way, whether they too would have the same bias.
This is really interesting. That we're really going here dangerous grounds, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing around bias and reflexivity. Qualitative researcher, you're right up front. This is who I am. I'm a white Eastern European feminist. And this is how it affects my interpretation. Nothing like that.
Good luck with that one.
Design that study.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.